Welcome to Prism Lens FX FAQ, a video series dedicated to answering the most common questions we get asked over at Prism Lens FX. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down the Pro Articulating Arm, ways that you can use it to creatively mount different prisms using this arm and mounting it to your rig. We're also going to cover how to set this thing up. So yeah, let's check it out. So how is this Pro Articulating Arm used? When we first launched this company, that was actually the light bulb moment that spurred the idea for Prism Lens FX, right? We made this company initially with the orb and the triangle prism, both that have a 1/4-20 threaded mount at the bottom. And the tricky thing is when you're sort of handheld and you're using one hand to pull focus and one hand to hold the shoulder rig, it's kind of hard. You don't have an additional hand to hold a prism in front of the lens. So that's where this came in handy. It has two 1/4-20, which is a pretty ubiquitous mounting system or thread system for cameras. The bottom of your photography camera has a 1/4-20. The top of most cinema cameras or cages have a 1/4-20. So this is a pretty standard way to mount this to your setup. And our triangle prism, orb prism, and our articulating clamp that can mount to the end to hold like a 150mm diopter or handheld kaleidoscope also receives a 1/4-20 mount as well. And the way this works is very simple. I'll obviously show some B-roll and some shots and some examples, but one end gets mounted to your camera and the other end mounts your prism. And once you really lock in these clamps, it essentially is fixing that prism, orb, triangle, handheld kaleidoscope, whatever you're using in that fixed position. So now when you pan and tilt, that filter or that prism is moving with the way you move the camera versus having to have another arm to hold a prism. So yeah, the arm in short essentially allows you to physically mount something in front of your camera setup without the need to actually physically hold it out in front of your lens. So when you order your Pro Articulating Arm, it's going to come in quite a few pieces. So I'm going to take this moment in the video to show you how to assemble your Pro Articulating Arm. The first piece, which you should have one of, is the actual arm itself. So there's one of these. There's the ball with the 1/4-20 on the end. So there should be two of these. And then there's the spring clamp that actually helps kind of be the friction that kind of binds these two together, which I'll demonstrate here in a second. And there should be two of these. I'll start with this. This is essentially the way to tighten or add friction to lock the articulating arm in whatever configuration is possible. And the part that I think trips a lot of people up is assembly, right? Like, where does this piece go? And the part that I believe does trip people up is if you look at this, right, there's kind of a spring on one side and then the way to tighten it here. And what we've had some customers do is they actually put the ball with the 1/4-20 where the handle is. And I'm going to show obviously an insert shot on the proper way. But the thing you really want to consider is you want to put the ball where the springs are. So look for the springs. Obviously you can loosen this to open this up as wide as possible. Keep in mind, if you loosen it too much, everything comes apart. So just be mindful of that. And once you see the springs and have like a wide enough opening, you put the ball right in between these two and just kind of with your fingers, close the springs. You can kind of see like that. And this part should spin freely. This is the way to tighten it. But you don't want to tighten it just yet because you also need to get the one end of the arm in this same exact clamp. So just loosening up a little bit with your fingers. I'm still kind of holding it all with one hand. You're going to want to get the arm, same thing, in between the springs. And now you can really pinch it with your fingers. And while holding it, just spin that. And now you're good to go. And what's really cool is when you really crank this in, that is rock solid. You know, I've used kind of cheaper little mini arms and, you know, they work for lighter things, but when you're arming out, you know, 8 to 12 inches and our orb prism, I think weighs, you know, quite a few pounds, like this thing's rock solid. It's not going anywhere. So once you really crank this sucker, this thing is really staying in place. So you would repeat that same exact process for the other end of the arm. And for storage, when you're all done, I like to just kind of loosen it up a little bit. You don't have to completely take it apart on every single shoot, but just loosen it up a little bit and it can kind of fold into itself and then just give it a little lock and you can kind of shove it into a camera pouch and it stores pretty easily as well. All right, that wraps up the Prism Lens FX FAQ on the Pro articulating arm. Did my best to answer some of the questions that we've been getting asked on the assembly and how this thing can be used. And even if you don't have our prisms or filters and you're just looking to add a Pro articulating arm to your kit, this arm is super solid, especially with the 8-inch reach. You can really arm things out, especially on a lot of like cinema setups where you really need to add like a onboard monitor or different accessories. With the 1/4 20 mount on both ends of this arm, you can use it with all camera accessories. So yeah, you can check out this Pro articulating arm over at prismlensfx.com.